inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210 KEVT, Sahuarita, Tucson. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. Timing can be everything in life. When you're born, when did you graduate college? What era did you live through, and are you satisfied? When art was considered a sustainable form of business. My guest today took advantage of his timing and luck and fused that with an adventuresome, often stream of consciousness taste in music. He understands his own Jewish roots and has devoted much of the last 15 years to promoting unsung international heroes like Chiune Sugihara, who was a Japanese diplomat, helped thousands of Jews escape Lithuania in World War II. This base understanding of history, fused with his musical musings, melded into amalgamation of Moby Grape, the Pointer Sisters, Cold Blood, and Buddy Rich. He produced African jazz albums by Herbie Hancock, which focused on layers of rhythms that would change moods within the 18-minute track. Like a sleeping giant, the tune moved from hypnotic percussion from the entire band to moody black jazz to funky blues back to Hancology. How this ever was pressed on a record and furthermore a major label is vexing to this host. From my insular vantage point, it speaks to a time in our society when stretching out was accepted and flaunted. The language of the rhythms indicates a lean towards education and teamwork with an onus on the accompanist, values that have been liquidated in a downsized music business. No longer an industry, the major labels make offers based on how many Twitter followers you have and not on the quality of the content. My guest has always been content, driven from his earliest days on Columbia Records to his merging with Bill Graham and the evolution of Fillmore and San Francisco record labels, which produced the sultry funk of early Tower of Power records. He has dealt with the biggest personalities in film and music, like Francis Ford Coppola during the making of Apocalypse Now, or rediscovering a magical shepherd with Miroslav Vitouš. It's what the kids want. It's the real thing. David Rubinson, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, how are you?
Great to talk.
Okay, yeah, I'm in France. It's 9 hours later here.
No, it's awesome. David, I wanted to start by asking you, in the 60s, when you were at Columbia, can you talk about some of the jazz clubs that you frequented in New York and the kind of spiritual music that you were just marinating in at that time?
I would love to, and I'll get to that in a moment. Do you mind if I just talk about something you said in the introduction?
Please.
For some reason, you concentrated on what you call my Jewish roots. My Jewish roots were brainwashing. I was told that we were the chosen people. It was a lie. The people I most trusted in my life, my grandparents and my parents, my uncles and my aunts, told me this lie, and I believed it for most of my life. And in fact, the last 5 or 10 years of my life have been spent trying to reverse that brainwashing and fight the evil, genocidal apartheid that Israel has become, the insanity of the Jewish lobby in America and around the world, and by helping the Palestinians and the Gazans to find the freedom and the return to their homeland that they deserd. I just want to say that.
No. I mean, this.
What you said had a little bit of a slant to it.
No. It was an overgeneralization, and
the reason I made the film about Chiune Sugihara was exactly to show that one person can make a difference in the world. He was a man who was sent to Europe to spy on the Nazis and the Russians, a Japanese man in the middle of Lithuania, if you could imagine. And his government told him not to give the Jews visas. And he did, and he saved 7,000 people by sending them to Japan, where they survived, where they were cared for by the Japanese, and resulted in uncountable numbers of descendants, 70, 80, 100,000 who are now alive. And the moral that we made, and the point we made in the film was, one man can make a difference. And I feel that about myself, and I feel that about all people who have been told lies of their lives and have an obligation to turn them around.
Okay, I want to talk to you. I was going to do this later in the program, but
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
you.
I know, no. It's
You want to go to
listen,
the gym?
no. Listen, I want to follow. I want to ask you something. My name is Feinberg. Okay, it's about the most Jewish name. Jacob Feinberg is the most Jewish name you could come up with. I was pretty much raised agnostic because my mom was Catholic. So, can you talk a little bit about a lie? Is a very kind of a strong word to use. But when you say that was there an arrogance in the way that they told you that they were the chosen people? Because I guess
how can they not? If you think you were the chosen, how can that not be arrogant?
But give it a personal example of how they lied to you.
They told me, well, every day. I was sent very early on in my life to schools that specifically taught me that the Jews were the chosen people of God, that when God told them to kill all the people in Canaan, it was cool. When God told them to walk into various places, lists of them, and kill all the people and take all the women and so on, it was okay because this was God's word and we were the chosen people. And that the Arabs were scum, that the Goyim were a second-grade group of people, that anybody who was not Jewish was, by definition, not chosen, and to be treated with ridicule and scorn. How many times in your life, Jake, were you told the Goyim this, the Goyim that? It was palpable from the time you woke up in the morning, and I went for it. And of course we went for it, like all kids who were schooled in certain dogma and certain attitudes. It wasn't one fact at a time. It was every day, all the attitudes, and that smirk about the Goyim and how, don't worry, we'll win. God is on our side. And then in 1947, 1948, I was 6. I was 7 years old. And I remember my grandparents listening to the radio when the UN passed the partition advice, not a mandate, not a law, not a direction, but their opinion. And the Arabs walked out, the horrible remarks they made. But pigs, look at them, disgusting. I mean, it was about the Irish, it was about the blacks, it was about the Italians in our neighborhood. It was all pervasive. And I have to say that, Tim White talks about this, but a lot of my friends never got over that brainwashing. And it's taken 73 years on this earth to even begin to do it.
This is talking to David Rubinson here and just coming out of the gates. I mean, I was really, we're coming from two different generations here. We'll have to get into this in part 2 or 3, but the thing is,
okay.
but I really want to ask you though, can you definitively say that some of that quote unquote brainwashing, did it help you develop relationships with other minorities that had been?
Yes.
Okay, can you talk about
yes.
that?
But it wasn't the brainwashing. The brainwashing hurt me in my relationship with blacks because I assumed the natural superiority.
Really?
I did it to Italians. I did it to Irish. But there were a lot of black people beginning to move into my neighborhood. I lived in Brooklyn, in a part of Brooklyn that was rapidly changing post-war. And my mother taught in Bedford-Stuyvesant. We were cusp of Bedford-Stuyvesant. It was St. John's Place was probably the edge border, and I went to a school where a lot of black kids went, more and more. And I had a lot of black friends. We never thought about it, except the racism was palpable. I don't know if you can even imagine.
No, I can't.
Well, I played ball with them. We played punch ball. We played baseball. We went to the movies together, but we didn't hang out in each other's houses. We didn't have black people for the house. I went to their houses sometimes. But there was a very sharp divide. And it wasn't because of the brainwashing, but it was understood that these are Schwarzes.
Can you talk?
And what happened from that, Jake, is really important.
No, go ahead.
I got to know black people. And my mother and father, for all of the racial superiority they taught me and all the attitudes about Goyim and so on, they deeply believed in racial freedom. They hated slavery. They hated the prejudice and the discrimination that went on. And the one thing that changed my life was baseball.
Go ahead.
I lived 10 blocks from Ebbets Field. I could hear the crowd roar when somebody hit a home run. I was there hundreds of times by myself with my friends. And I fell in love with Jackie Robinson when I was 7 years old. And when I mean he was he was profoundly important in my life. He was overweight a little bit, not when he first came up, but he didn't take shit from anybody. And we got a television when I was about, I would be 49, maybe 8 years old. And I never missed a Dodger game. They were in black and white on the little screen. I went to the games on the weekends. I fell in love with Jackie Robinson and with his cause and what it stood for. And I really became infused with this deep energy to make things right.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was interesting. My parents were very strong unionists, very, very much they voted for Henry Wallace. They were very big New Dealers. They hated Nixon. They hated Dewey, and they hated all those horrible Dixiecrats, and they hated segregation. Even while they were, I don't know, what can you say, Jewish supremacists in that funny way that nice Jewish people have.
Even in my own little world here in Tucson, we have a pretty substantial Jewish community and many different philosophies, but the most conservative Orthodox Jews do have that supremacist quality. It's a smugness. It's an arrogance. It drives me insane. And this is coming from somebody who is not bar mitzvahed. We can vet this more. The final question I have for you on this topic, though, for this chapter, was there a definitive turning? Was it moving to Europe? Was there? I mean, it sounds to me that you were.
No. There was no definitive turning point until, and I it's a while ago, but I remember seeing. I was in New York. I brought my kids to New York for, I think it was Christmas or Easter. I can't remember. And I remember seeing pictures on the cover of the front page of the New York Post. It may have been, I don't know. Couldn't have been, I don't know if it couldn't have been 67. It would have been the war after, of a massacre of the Palestinians. And it really turned my head around. And I started, because you remember, I was a big leftist. I started marching for integration when I was 15. I marched on Washington when I was 15, 16. I organized in my high school. I was a big political activist from a very early age. And still, with that, I thought the Jews needed a homeland, that Israel was their promised land. I still went for all that. But something happened, and I can't remember the date, but I remember the picture. And I think it may have been the bullshit Yom Kippur War, I can't remember. But I started to realize the horror of what was going on and started to read. And I turned gradually around.
David, I just want to. David, I'm having a ball. I'm already having a ball. I want to tell you, we're on live radio. Just watch the colorful language, if at all possible. I really. Other than it's okay.
What did I say?
No, you'll hear it back. I'll give you. It's all good.
I'm sorry.
We got a lot. I mean, so it sounds to me this is an amazing story because this evolution has been going on for 50 years for you or more.
Oh, no, 40, maybe 45, yeah.
Well, we'll continue to. Yeah, I mean, this is.
The evolution. Yeah. The evolution's been going on for a long time, but the actual momentum has been going on for a long time, and it takes that long. It takes that long. Look how long it's taking second, third, fourth, fifth generation white Southerners to accept integration. Or how long it didn't even take it. With Reconstruction, they just turned it over. One generation later, they had destroyed it. But that's why I worked with the flotillas and the Palestine Unity people and the Palestine Solidarity Movement and Freedom for Gaza and all those movements. It was a way, maybe of expiation, maybe trying to be a force, like I said, one man can make a difference, just one small difference. And I felt that. I felt I don't know about you, me as a Jew, although I don't identify as a Jew anymore, we, as part of what's defined as Jews, have a very special obligation to make it right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what motivated me.
I want to keep you keep dragging me along into this thing. I want to. I just want to say something.
It's not a problem. We could talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk. I mean, the problem is that to me is that. Okay, I don't want to keep going on this because I don't want to lose this whole hour right now. This is very important stuff. This is very important. Okay, my initial question. First of all, did you catch the intro track coming in? That music.
No, I couldn't hear it. It was all distorted.
That was a band that you produced called Aum. I think I'm pronouncing A-U-M.
Aum. It was a reversal of the Om that you chant. Om.
God is back in town. Yeah. God is back in. I mean, this is what I'm trying to say is David Rubinson, for this being able to step back and become a historian and read and to learn the diversity and eclecticism of your musical taste and what you decided to go after and get onto record that in itself, for somebody who's only 37 and just starving for substance, is remarkable stuff. Instead of it, you can fuse this into the jazz club thing. Tell me about Sonny Lester. Did you meet him early on in your career?
No.
Okay, so can you talk about some of the clubs that you would go to in the 60s to catch Rasan, Roland?
Wait a minute. In the 50s.
Go ahead.
I was born in 1942. In 1958, when you were 16, I was already playing in bands by the time I was 14. Birdland had a policy on Sundays, and I think the Vanguard did too, where underage people could go and sit in a place called the Bullpen with only, soft drinks, and they would have a Sunday matinee for whoever was playing the rest of the week. And man, that was like manna from heaven. And most of the time, you could kind of and I looked pretty old. I mean, I didn't look like a 16-year-old. You could kind of amble into places and kind of, get your way into the half note or whatever it was, 5-spot that you pull. And it was at Birdland that you could see everybody. And I remember seeing the great Miles Davis quintet and sextet with Train and Adderley and Red Garland and Philly Joe Jones. I mean, you sat 20 feet away. It was just unbelievable. And you could go to these places and hang.
Right.
And from that time, whenever I could get into the city, I'd take the train or have a friend or two friends, whoever. And it was great because I had a girlfriend, and there was a place called the Embers, which was a very upscale place. Couldn't afford that. But these places had lots of music. Lots of music.
Can you talk about when you would sit 20 feet away? I mean, the idea that these cats, they were playing what was inside of them. They were telling a story about their lives in general. I'm talking, compared to the digitization that we now.
Well, I found it more. Let me go back because you're talking about jazz clubs, but my great, can I say, jolt didn't come from the jazz musicians. It came from the black musicians that used to come to the Brooklyn Paramount. So when you were 13, 14, 15, 16 in Brooklyn, you could go to the Brooklyn Paramount on a weekend and see 8, 9 bands, artists, singers play. And it was crazy in there. I mean, everybody was dancing and screaming, and it was the real shit. So that was really at least as formative. It was the coup de coeur, It was like, boom. Or maybe coup de foudre. It was closer. I mean, it was a jolt. And that's where I think I got turned on to the possibilities, the expanse, the energy, the honesty of black music first.
These were R&B bands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Specifically, yeah. So it was like the
Coasters, the Drifters.
Yeah.
Whoever had a hit.
Right.
Because the radio station DJ, God, I forget his name.
Harry
Abramson? What? No, the guy. Oh no, before him, the guy from Cleveland. Skip it.
I don't know.
Anyway, they would bring in. They would make these guys do the shows because they played their music, right? You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, you realize that they were communicating in their own language. I mean,
they were communicating what white people couldn't communicate.
Which is what?
Communicate.
I want
Feeling, the real feeling, the real stuff. Feeling. I mean, when I didn't like rock and roll music. I didn't like country music. I didn't like rock and roll music.
I love it.
I've been brought up on classical music. And then I went away to a kind of a socialist communist youth camp, and I learned about folk music.
What camp was that?
Oh, it was a camp in Vermont called Higley Hill. It was a very well-known camp where a lot of the extreme left people sent their kids.
It was a Jewish summer camp?
No, not Jewish at all.
Oh.
It was multiracial, and it was run by very extreme left-wing radicals.
How are they radical?
In every way possible. They were radical politically. They were radical in terms of how they ran the camp. They were radical in philosophy, and they were radical musically. I mean, it was all about folk music and music about labor movements and about. I mean, Pete Seeger used to come up and sing.
Right.
So it was a whole different exposure to me. I was about 14, I think, 13 or 14.
I just love, I mean, we're talking to David Rubinson live from France here on Power Talk 1210. Were you one of those cats that early on in the 50s started to really dive into the Folkways records compendium? Were you able to get exposed to that world music?
Of course. Well, I had a girlfriend at the time who she was a real folkie. She belonged to the Young Folklorist Guild, and she had a guitar, and she sang and played beautifully. And you would go to Washington Square Park in New York on weekends, and all the musicians would show up, all the folk musicians. Banjos, guitars, harmonicas, that kind of thing. And everybody would play and sing. And the music of the political movement at that time was all folk music. So the music we were following was all folk music, and of course jazz, but it was, what you were asking me about was my Catholic taste in music. And I'm trying to paint for you the kind of variety of musical experience I had growing up. My father was a classical musician. My first instrument was classical guitar. He had a group of 6 who played every Friday night at somebody's house. They would play all classical music. And I would sit in when I could, but they were very good. And there was always folk music going on in the house. The Weavers were a tremendous hero to us, and Woody Guthrie and of sorts. And then gradually, I began to learn about folk music that way, and then jazz. But what I was hearing on the radio, whatever my kids or my friends were dancing to, was the music that was on AM radio. And that was rock and roll. And I was just surrounded with all these different influences, but I didn't like rock and roll. I liked the R&B that I heard down the other end of the dial. And there was a guy who used to broadcast from Newark, New Jersey, called Raymond Bruce. I am the Bruce. I don't know if anybody would ever remember him.
Right.
But he used to play the serious rhythm and blues records. And I was always shocked because I'd hear Long Tall Sally or Tutti Frutti by the original, not Pat Boone.
Right, exactly. You're nailing it. You're nailing it again. Okay, right.
And I said, wow, wait a minute. Who is this guy, Little Richard? I never heard of Little Richard.
Right.
And he'd play, Dance With Me, Henry. Roll With Me, Henry. Not Georgia Gibbs playing Dance With Me, Henry. Roll With Me, Henry. The real stuff. The Midnighters. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
I would listen to Raymond Bruce. I had one friend in junior high school. So we were, 13? Who listened to the same. We loved this music. So I was surrounded with every kind of music you can imagine, and I loved it all. I really did. But the R&B music killed me.
Okay,
It just was fantastic stuff.
This is so awesome. I talked to Ellis Marsalis, the father of all the Marsalis sons.
Sure.
And he told me this story. I'm just going to let you take the floor. Explain how we got from race records to rhythm and blues to rock as it relates to the labeling of the genre. Ellis said that race records went to rhythm and blues because there was an offensive term, so there was a lawsuit, and it was changed. And then Elvis was playing rhythm and blues, singing it. They thought he was a black guy, but when they found out he was white, they changed it to rock. Can you enlighten me on that?
I'm not a historian in the way that Ellis is. This guy's encyclopedia.
You just triggered it because
black.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you just triggered it because you talked about hearing the original.
Oh, no, of course.
parts.
No,
Yeah.
I'm going to explain my point of view. It may not be as historically accurate as his, but race records started in the 30s. We can't forget that Bessie Smith saved Columbia Records. Vocalion saved Columbia Records. They were going bankrupt. When the Depression hit, it was murder. And a lot of these record companies that had started were going out of business. And if it wasn't for Bessie Smith and Ida Cox and Ma Rainey and a lot of the other people, they wouldn't have been able to survive. But when we got to the 40s, the black music was only available through black venues. And when radio, after the musicians' union strike was over, and the musicians and the radio stations could start playing music again, white radio played white records, black radio played black records. You could not get a black singer on white radio. Maybe the Mills Brothers once in a while, Opus One, something like that. But so all this incredible energy, post-war energy, Ike Turner and all those people making music, Wynonie Harris, that whole had this energy coming, and they couldn't get on white radio. But rhythm and blues radio, R&B radio, or then race radio, black radio, these tiny little stations in every town, which exploded after the war, were playing the records. And they were selling a lot of them. So the white record, and Ahmet Ertegun and his brother, and Herb Abramson at Atlantic Records would fill up the trunk of the car with the records they were making and go from town to town and go to the radio stations. I mean,
oh my God.
That's the way it was done.
Unbelievable.
But the white labels didn't have black artists like that. What they did was and of course the Mafia, and like at Atlantic, they got Georgia Gibbs, right, who was white enough to cover a Hank Ballard record, take out the dirty parts and make a hit single. And then they discovered things like Pat Boone, maybe the greatest cultural resource theft in the history of the music business. It's possible. So they would go and they'd hear the newest black hit, whatever it was. They'd grab it, copy the track, put his name on it, and go to the white radio stations and make all the money. Now, Billboard had two charts. They had the race chart and the white chart. And as history developed, they had to stop calling it race records, because that's what it was called when Bessie Smith was making it. It had to be called something else. And it did become rhythm and blues, and the derivation of the records where that was. But then the lyrics in the records started to talk about rock me this, roll me that, rock and roll. And I don't know if it's true that they had to call it rock and roll because of Elvis. I have no idea.
Right.
But to me, Elvis was a very talented, but historically pernicious continuation of the Pat Boone syndrome. He took the sounds that he heard around him, he took the black man's music, and he went to white radio and he made millions. And it was with Ed Sullivan was not going to put Little Richard on. So that whole, cultural resource theft, which has gone on and continues to go on, even now, is part of the whole resource theft of white people and white capitalists of black resources, whether it's diamonds in South Africa or beaches and sunshine in Jamaica or rhythm and blues. And what it meant to me was I was surrounded with all of this. And I went with the music I really dug.
Did you?
That reached my heart, that reached me. And that was black music in every form.
Two questions come from that. One, okay, so there's a two-part question. Did your folks, when you were starting to work with Taj Mahal and the Chambers Brothers, did they appreciate and understand, or did they were they able to table their arrogance? Number two, who was the
Well, my parents, my mother and father, weren't arrogant. They were brainwashed. My father died when I was very, very young. He never got to see me do anything. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he never found out. It all turned out okay. I left my house to go to school, and I was out of my house most of the time. I was playing bar mitzvahs and weddings and concerts, whatever I could get as a musician, very young. And my mother was never an arrogant Jew, but they were superior. They were Zionists. So when I started working in the music business, one of the first records I did was the history of black music in America, which is another story. But I remember my mother couldn't understand what I did for a living. She was afraid I was never going to be anything. I mean, I went to Columbia. I played in bands. I directed the theater, but I had no degree in anything except, English literature. How was I ever going to make a living? My girlfriend, who I married, her father said, David, that's really wonderful, but how are you going to make a living, right?
Yeah.
And so I finally invited my mother to a recording session. And it was, I don't want to get into it, but she came to the recording session. It was about 60 musicians. We were doing a Broadway cast album. I was working my ass off, right? And after the 3-hour union break, she got up to leave and she said, they pay you to do this? They pay you to do this? And I said, yeah. She went, whew, wow. That was it.
Yeah.
She never made any contact with the music I did. She never listened to the records I made. And she came to a porn sister show once, but, really, they had no idea what I was up to, and they had great fears that I was ever going to even be able to pay the rent.
Who was the,
They weren't arrogant, though. They were just, they had that superiority that they were superior to the Goyim and certainly to the blacks.
Right. The brainwashing, the superiority part, I kind of just had this vision that maybe your mom would have seen some of the prolific work you did with black musicians and maybe would have been crying at some point, but that was just totally a dream. Who was the first trap set drummer? You were in the folk scene up in Vermont. It was a leftist, a lot of banjos and maybe an upright string bass here and there, but not even from the folk scene. Who was the first trap set cat that you really got off on?
Well, let's go back just for a second. I was in a jazz band then.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We had the guitar, bass, and drum, clarinet, and drums.
Wow.
And I have pictures of me from that band.
I need those pictures.
And we listened to jazz. We were kind of like I hate to say they're not the outcasts, but culturally a little off the wall because everybody was playing folk music at this camp. Everybody had guitars. Everybody was singing, the folk music. But we had a little jazz group, and we played what passed for jazz. And, I was, I think 13, 14, maybe I turned 14 that summer. But I have pictures of it, and it was very enlightening. But the first guy who blew my mind was Philly Joe Jones.
Explain why.
And, he was amazing. But I think I got the cataclysmic vision that I was never going to be anything decent as a musician by watching Philly Joe Jones. At the Birdland with the Miles Davis Band, with Paul Chambers and Garland and all the people, probably, the dates are escaping me, maybe 58, 59 maybe. But when I started hearing him, or started hearing, some of the other guys, Jimmy Cobb or any of these kind of guys, it became very clear that the level of musicianship was really miles past, that's a joke, but way past anything I could ever even begin to approach. So I think Philly Joe was the first. What kind of a brush player he was? I mean, he turned brushes into a symphony.
Right.
He was amazing.
Well, those guys, I mean, if they had to play brushes the whole set, they would, and they do it so tastefully. You know, it's just a taste kind of thing.
Tastefully.
Very tasteful.
I mean, he had about 20 different ways of playing brushes that were fantastic. Fantastic. And you know who else I loved? Well, I loved a lot of guys. But, I mean, the first time you see Elton Jones, the first time you see Art Blakey, your head explodes. And you can imagine, I mean, 14, 15, 18 years old, 16 years old, and it was just unbelievable. But I remember Philly Joe the best. I don't know why, but I remember him the best.
Yeah, well,
as like a boom, you know, the thunderclap, you know.
Being that you were a musician, or maybe you still, I don't know if you still continue to play at all, but
Oh, no, don't call me a musician, I was never.
Okay. No, you were channeling kind of that Buddy DeFranco thing with the clarinet and the drums. Can you talk about their use? I put up an excerpt, David and I are friends on Facebook. I put up an excerpt the other day about,
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute.
It's okay. I was explaining that we're connected on social media, and I put up a clip, quote about Joe Sample talking about modern day drummers not using cymbals. And I wanted you to talk about Philly Joe, Elvin, Blakey, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but
no. How about Dave Tuff? How about Dave Tuff in 1938?
Right.
One of the great cymbal players, Louis Belson. Right.
I wanted you to talk about the emotive qualities of the cymbals. I think it was a very prescient point.
Yes.
And I wanted you to talk about from just being actually an observer in the club, hearing how they use the cymbals to really.
Well, now you're talking. See, you talk about Philly Joe, or Elvin, or Blakey, but the best to me with cymbals is Max Roach.
Right.
I mean, he was incredible, and he used every part of the cymbals, you know? I find a lot of drummers that I listen to hit the cymbal. You know what I mean? And it's a lot of what Joe was talking about. They hit the cymbal, and they ride on the cymbal, or they hit the hi-hats, but they don't orchestrate. And these guys, Philly Joe, Max Roach, these were, or Chico Hamilton. Am I getting too obscure?
Are you kidding me? We're just getting started. I mean, we have just been marinating. No, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that it created space within the music. I don't even in a live context now. It just seems to me that there's this rush and not a lot of this kind of this breathing that was created.
Oh, no, I have a theory. You want to hear my theory?
Go on.
I have a theory. Maybe it's not mine. See, I got it in my head from somewhere. I think that with the advent of drum machines, drummers are imitating the machines because that's the sound they're hearing 24/7. No dynamics, no open space, no breath, no air, no phrasing, no beautiful tonalities. It's sample drumming.
Right.
It's loop drumming.
No, I think you're spot on.
It's drum machine drumming.
Right.
And what they're doing, what I'm hearing, is that the live drummers are playing like machines. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, and we're going to back this up with we have a game on this program called Name That Tune. We're going to put this track of music in, and then we'll come back and break it down, okay?
Okay.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, sponsored in part by the Stereo Hospital, Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we are forever indebted for their support to allow us to play live on the radio for David Rubinson. You want to take a guess on that tune, Mr. Rubinson?
I'll take a guess. Problem is, at my age, I can't remember the name.
It's okay. Did you remember that was?
That was Immondici. That was Herbie's Immondici band.
That's correct, and was. And
I don't know if it was Sleeping Giant or I don't remember what song.
You're good, man. You're good. That was off Crossings. The name of the tune, Sleeping Giant. And
yeah.
I got to tell you something. Is that right or no? I got to tell you something. Yesterday I'm playing soccer with my younger daughter, and I pick her up because I was trying to find a playlist for this interview, and I start to dance with her, and I got incredibly lightheaded and dizzy for the rest of the night. And I love. My question here, David, is, can you put me in the studio with you about when all 8 cats, or whoever was doing it, Victor Pantoa, Benny Maupin, Julian, Herbie, they're all playing percussion live in the studio, and tell me about the role that you played insofar as layering the rhythms, the advice. I have to believe that you were some kind of conduit to that. I just want, if you can put me back in that session, because I can't stop listening to that track.
Wow, that's great that you say that. I'm going to do that. I hate to do this to you again. Just listen to Billy Hart on that track. I know. It's hypnotic. I mean,
it's insane.
Man, he's got a palette. He's not playing with drumsticks, he's playing with paintbrushes. Listen to Billy Hart. Listen to Buster. These guys, they're playing not only the tonalities and the colors, rhythmically, they're totally in the pocket. There's a pocket as strong as any Purdy pocket.
Right.
But all those things going on, and no machine can do that. These are real musicians. These guys could, oh man. It blows my mind when I hear that. I've heard it recently, about 2 months ago. And it's just beautiful. So there's the difference that Joe was talking about. It's just musicianship and artistry, and also, I think in that interview, he also talked about listening, didn't he?
He did. He absolutely did.
And when you put the Immondici band in the studio, and it was 7 guys, and they were all constantly like musical open wounds to each other. They reacted to the slightest shift in the air, the slightest breath, the slightest phrase, the slightest whim that they could sense going on. They could anticipate. They knew where it was going, and then they would get surprised, and then someone would feel somebody thinking they knew where it was going, so they'd front them and go somewhere else, It was fantastic.
It is so, you have no idea how much, it's not quantitative, how much that tune, I haven't even gotten to side B yet, because for a long time, my ear was not trained to listen to the trust that was going on within the music, and then you hear these...
The trust that was going on.
Just for the record, I want to be, this is important for history, Victor Pantoa is also there. Was there any on that?
Who?
Victor Pantoa.
No, Pantoja.
Pantoja.
Victor Pantoja was a conga player, yes.
And you can tell, can you say that there is, on that particular album, Crossings, was he in the studio? Were they all there at the same time? Was there any overdubbing of percussion? Because at a certain point, it sounds like you're in the jungle. It's just, you're out there, and there is...
No, that's processing. That's post-production. I don't think, I think the only thing we overdubbed was the backwards piano.
What's a backwards piano?
Yeah.
Well, what is that?
It's too dense. I can't remember.
Okay.
I remember overdubbing a backwards piano. It may not even be that song. So I don't know. But fundamentally, and something Eddie Henderson gets completely wrong, The group was an electronic group from the beginning. And what people have to understand, what Eddie had to understand was, I couldn't tell anybody what to play. Who the hell would I be to tell somebody what to play? Out of the question.
Right.
What I had to do was create an environment where that could all happen.
How did you
and to work as a catalyst with Herbie to expand his palette to include the studio. And this is a very important concept. I know you're running out of time. Maybe we'll have a chance some other time, but black musicians had no access to post-production. The Rudy Van Gelder, Blue Note, white producer mentality, the sharecropper mentality was pervasive.
Wow.
Very rare for a black musician or artist to be able to be involved in the post-production.
Can you, this is so much, can you talk about specifically, based on what, in the late 60s, the sharecropper mentality? Can you give it a specific example?
I don't know that we have time, but...
we do.
Okay. X record company would sign an artist like, Wayne Shorter or whatever it was, or Miles Davis, and put them in the studio with a white man. And the white man would be a producer like Tio, or an engineer like Rudy Van Gelder, or who was the guy who so-called produced Charlie Parker? Raz Russell?
Right, that's right.
I don't remember. He was the guy to make sure that the slaves didn't get too rambunctious.
Yeah.
And they would be in charge. There's that famous scene with Tino Macero and Thelonious Monk in the film Straight No Chaser, right? Where the Thelonious' band plays an incredible take, right? And they finish, and Monk goes, "Oh, man, Tio, let's hear that back." And Tio says, "Oh, we weren't rolling." And Monk gets up from the chair and says, "This is a recording studio, man. You're supposed to be recording my music." I mean, that's what they were afraid. Who knows? They would steal the chair, take one of the microphones, but there was always a white guy. And that went all the way through Ray Charles. There was always a white guy. Turkish, but white. And all these black artists had to have a white guy. And it went through a lot of Atlantic's recordings. In jazz, it was particularly noxious. And what I felt my important role was to expand Herbie's incredible imagination and expand it with a palette of technological and post-production techniques that he could employ as part of his composition and playing. And the studio became another part of his repertoire. It became another musician. It became another element. Instead of being recorded, he used the studio as like a band member, like a composer. And that's what I think Eddie didn't understand.
Well, we're gonna.
That's what
I don't want David. I want to say thank you so much for staying up late tonight. Go have a nice, cocktail or whatever, and we'll plan on doing something in the next month again, because I didn't even get to anything, and we just blew through that hour. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it, because it was a ball.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I don't talk about this stuff much, so there it goes. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, David, we'll be in touch, brother.
Okay, bye.
All right, we'll be right back on the Jake Feinberg Show. Sea Palace, hour number 2 here on the Jake Feinberg Show. A mind-blowing part 1 here.